The Reynolds Museum Harvest Festival 2023. My name is Erin and I'm going to show you how to make cinnamon buns today. So first of all, what you want to do is combine your yeast and your flour. So we're going to start off with about half of the flour needed. So it is about 4 cups of flour, as well as a little bit of salt, whatever your preference is. And we're going to combine those together. And then in a separate bowl, I like to use a large measuring cup. We are going to take 3 cups of warm water. You don't want hot or boiling water because that will kill your yeast. You're going to put in sugar, oil, and 2 eggs. And you're going to break up those eggs and just combine all of that together until the sugar starts to dissolve. And then we're going to grab our dry ingredients and we're going to make a well into the center. And we're going to pour our wet ingredients into that well. It's okay if it's messy. It's part of the fun. And then we're going to start to combine all of that together. So because we're only using about 1/3 of the flour at this point, it's going to be pretty gloopy and it's going to be pretty messy, and that's okay. So you just want to combine it until all of your dry pockets start to disappear. And it's going to be pretty chunky. It's going to look like oatmeal, and that's exactly what you want. And then we're just going to slowly start adding in more flour. You can do this in kind of 1 or 2 cup measurements. And you're just going to keep stirring. Not too crazy or else your flour goes everywhere. And once it starts sticking to your spoon and kind of moving as one big mass, you can kind of start to get messy and get your hands in there. So we're going to put a bit more flour in. In total, you're looking at about 7 to 8 cups of flour for a single recipe. And a lot of the time, this just depends on the time of year. When it's more humid out, you're gonna be using less flour. When it's drier out, same thing. So you're just gonna kind of squeeze it together, get that flour incorporated. And once it starts to not stick to your hands too much, you can also turn it out onto the table if you like. But first, you're going to want to make sure that you put some flour onto your table so that it doesn't stick. Or if you have a silicone mat, you can do that as well. And we're just going to keep squeezing it, getting all that flour incorporated. And then we're going to start to work at kneading it. And you're going to be using the heels of your hands and pushing forward. It's really up to personal preference how you knead your dough. Some people like to do it in a mixer as well, which works for this recipe too. So you can see I'm starting to get a pile of flour here with a little bit of dough. So I'm just gonna grab the dough and start to incorporate that, but I'm not gonna keep incorporating this flour because all of this is starting to stick together without it. So that's gonna be my extra flour. And I'm just gonna keep moving it over and kneading it together. And for cinnamon buns, it doesn't take too long for kneading. It's not a high exercise bread, unlike pretzels and things. And you can see it's starting to stick together better, it's starting to get more elasticy. So we're just gonna keep working at that until it gets nice and smooth. So I'd probably keep working at this for probably another minute or 2, but we're gonna show you what the next result is. And we're gonna roll that out with a little bit of flour on our table. It's got little chunks in it, that's okay. And we're just gonna give it a really quick punch down to get some of those air bubbles out. And we're gonna divide this into half. So this is already halved. So when you are doing a full recipe, you wanna divide it into 4, but because this is already in half, we're gonna divide it again. Put a little bit of flour on our surface for rolling out. We're just gonna squish it out into kind of like a rectangle shape at first. And grab a rolling pin. Depending on your rolling pin, you might need to add a bit more flour. If you're using a metal rolling pin, you usually don't need any more flour. And we're gonna start to roll from the inside out. And then you can flip it over. Just keep working at it. Sometimes you get little chunks in there, you just take them out. This dough's a little cold. You can kind of stretch it out a bit if you need. If you don't have big muscles. And the weight of it, kind of like a pizza, the weight of it starts to drag it out. How big you make it is totally up to your preference. I like having really fat, thick cinnamon buns, so I usually do it to about there. So you can either use cold butter or you can use melted. I prefer using cold butter. I just find it makes them gooier. And then, of course, we want our brown sugar. So there is an allotment in there in the recipe, but I like to just let your heart decide. Put in as much as looks good. A little bit more. And then for the cinnamon buns, of course, we need some cinnamon. So we're gonna sprinkle that in there. You don't want too much cinnamon or else it makes it bitter. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna roll it. So you can either roll it lengthways or you can roll it this way. It just depends on how thick you want your cinnamon buns. So today we're gonna do it this way. And you're just gonna roll it up kind of like a jelly roll. And then you're gonna fold over the edges and you're just gonna pinch them in. That way, it's a little bit more secured. And then what I like to do is I like to tuck in the ends as well, and then all of your goodies don't fall out. Just gonna flip that, squeeze it out a little bit to get the most bang for our buck. And then you can use dental floss, you can use a knife. I like using a pastry cutter. And then you're just gonna cut your cinnamon buns. You wanna make sure that they're kind of the same size or else they're gonna cook differently. And you want all of them to cook the same. And you're gonna grab a cookie sheet with some parchment paper. Parchment paper is your best friend because then you don't have to do a lot of scrubbing. And again, I like to put a bit more butter into the pan, as well as a bit more sugar. Because why not? If you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it right. And then this will create kind of like a little crystallized bottom on all of your cinnamon buns as well. And this is just a base recipe. So with our cinnamon bun recipe, you can make poppy seed buns, you can make cheese buns, you can make all sorts of different things. And you can usually fit about 3 across, 2 down. We're gonna do that. You wanna give them a little bit of space because they are going to be expanding as they rise. So these guys are gonna go be put away to rise. And these are some that were made earlier that are already starting to rise. And so once these have risen for about 30 minutes, you're gonna pop them in the oven and then you have cinnamon buns. And we hope that you make them. You can find our recipes online as well as on our social media.